Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center Network with support from K-12 and Fuel Education and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. We're looking forward to having a conversation with you today at this end with Sandy Addis and me. Lucky Sandy, what a great topic today.
Yes, Marty, thank you. Today we're going to look at the importance of the arts in improving student success and graduation outcomes.
We are, and we have a research-based paper that we want everybody to look at after the program today, because it's not just Sandy and me. I might mention we do have a guest.
Yes, we do.
From Los Angeles, and we will get to him in just a minute by Skype. But, let's just talk about that paper for a minute, because it was an eye-opener, the research base behind the value of all kinds of arts in the development of our young people.
Marty, in October, the National Dropout Prevention Center released a position paper that addresses the role of the arts in dropout prevention. And historically, we haven't given much thought to that, but yet we know that when students are engaged with school-connected things that they find interesting, whether it be band or whether it be visual arts or whether it be any form of performing arts, we know that they're more engaged and more successful in school. We also know that if we go a step further, as we'll hear about today, and tie the arts into the other instructional areas, that we get even greater success. So the National Dropout Prevention Center in October released a position paper on this very topic, and that position paper is available on our website. It's available as a link from this broadcast. It can be downloaded and shared with other educators, so we would ask folks to take a look at that.
I mean, I will tell you that if the topic makes solutions, it's research-based.
Yes.
And this has got tremendous research behind it. You may feel like intuitively it's a good thing, or you knew this one or that one, but there's absolute evidence to show how incorporating the arts makes a difference. So we encourage you to continue on with the broadcast as we talk to someone who's actually implementing arts programs for young people in California. Tell us about our guest.
Well, Marty, we're very fortunate to have Mark Slavkin with us. Mark joined us at our recent national conference in October out in Palm Springs, California. And Mark spoke to our audience of dropout practitioners about how the arts can be utilized to help them achieve their goals for students, and opened a lot of eyes, mine included. Mark is the Director of Education for the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Los Angeles. He's been involved in the arts in a variety of ways. Mark is also a former member of the Board of Education of Los Angeles Unified School District, which gives him a different perspective. So he's been in this area from all sides and in many levels. So we're very fortunate to have Mark join us today by Skype from Los Angeles. Mark, welcome.
Good morning. I'm happy to join you.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you.
Good.
And to meet you this way. This is kind of fun. I love this, and it's like you're right here at the table with us. So we really look forward to hearing you. You are an educator. I think Sandy's point about you being on the school board is really interesting to me. I didn't know that. But as an educator, you are involved in the community rather than based in a school. And so please tell us about this Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts and what that actually is, and we'll go from there. We're going to have a great conversation.
Well, sure. I'm delighted to be with you, and thank you for including me today. The Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts, we call the Wallace for short because that's a mouthful. We just turned 4 years old. We're a new cultural organization in Beverly Hills, based in the old Beverly Hills post office that was actually built in 1933 and is a remarkable historic building. So we've taken what was a post office and converted it into 2 theaters, a 500-seat state-of-the-art theater that's brand new construction, and a 150-seat black box theater that's part of the original building. And a core part of our mission is sharing the arts with all aspects of our community, people of all ages, from young children through adults, but a particular focus on those who lack access to the arts. people who, due to socioeconomic status or sometimes due to disability, often don't have access to the arts. And we have a strong commitment to making sure that everybody is included. And we do that through hosting K-12 schools who come on field trips to see performances throughout our season. And we also have 3 beautiful classrooms on site where we host classes in music and dance and theater for learners of all ages.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful place. I love the idea that it's in an old post office building. So, I know when local community theaters and other groups look around for space, this happened here in our neck of the woods at a much smaller scale. There was an old school that had an auditorium, and then they built a new school, and there was this building. And so the youth theater moved into that and took over from there. And there are places that are already built that can provide this in your community. So everybody needs to look out and see what's out there and get some partnerships going. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you partner with the public schools?
We do. We host, as I mentioned, K-12 schools throughout the year come on field trips. And then we have an in-depth partnership with 5 schools in underserved communities, elementary through high school, where we're also bringing resources to the school and trying to serve as a catalyst to help those schools expand arts opportunities for their students. So, for example, one of our partners is a LAUSD high school called West Adams High School, and we're working with their teachers to help them develop strategies to integrate the arts into other course areas. So they do have arts teachers who are fantastic, but we're also working with the algebra teacher and the history teacher and the Spanish teacher to think about how they can enliven what they do and make learning more meaningful and maybe more relevant by integrating the arts with these other course areas.
And I think this is what you were talking about, Sandy, about what really blew your mind, or I don't know about blew your mind, but really intrigued you from your visit to the conference in Palm Springs, of course. And so maybe you could share some of that with us, Mark, for those who were not lucky enough to be there.
Well, sure. The first point that I made is we often divide the world as educators between what we think of as instruction and what we label enrichment. And often the arts are put in a box called enrichment, which we think of as optional and elective, often not as rigorous, and not something that necessarily is shared with all students, but is what I call instructional dessert that is offered to higher achieving kids, sometimes as a reward, or they're doing so well they can take elective courses in their schedule and be in the theater or band or dance or whatever it might be, which is terrific. But we want to help people think about the arts as part of instruction for all students, and to know that all of our states have adopted specific content standards in the arts that define for each grade level what kids should know and be able to do. And those standards broaden the definition of what the arts include. So it's not just putting on a show, which is often top of mind when we think of the arts, but it's also learning to interpret works of art, to become literate in understanding the elements of art, in understanding important artists and their place in history, understanding how the arts convey important issues and ideas. And when you open that box of content and realize that the arts and humanities broadly offer a window into the human experience, then light bulbs often go off for educators, where they think of, well, that's true. We could read about the Harlem Renaissance in a textbook, but what if we bring in works of art into the classroom and let kids understand how Langston Hughes contributed, or an artist, Romare Bearden, contributed. Now learning becomes more interesting. It's not just text on a page. It's music, it's visual images, it can be video of dance performances, whatever it might be. Now educators have a broader set of tools to share. And for kids who just are bored, frankly, sitting still in class and reading all day, to enliven their learning with the arts, to get them out of their chairs and working to bring a scene of history to life in a brief skit, to think about how music can illustrate key ideas or dance can show how the elements of a molecule work. Suddenly, kids are learning in different ways. School is fun. They find that they are successful in ways that maybe they weren't before. So that's the idea of arts integration, is going beyond just text and numbers and using the full palette of human creativity to make learning fun.
Mark, I'm sitting here thinking as a traditional teacher, and when you and I talked in Palm Springs, I think I intended to admit to you that I had been in that very box. I was the history teacher who saw the arts down the other hall as dessert, and but yet I'm now seeing different thanks to you. How do you help teachers make that mindset change?
Well, it's a great question, and I think the great barrier that we face is people feel they don't have enough time in the school day or the school year to do what is already expected of them. So how can they introduce something that feels completely new or feels kind of off to the side? So I find a better way to enter the conversation, let's talk about a history teacher, is to ask them what are their greatest challenges. And obviously every teacher is different, but often a history teacher will say, my kids read robotically but don't have deep understanding. They might memorize facts and figures and dates, but they're not internalizing the larger ideas. They don't find history relevant to their lives or their challenges. And so those are real issues that a history teacher faces. So if you approach them with, what if we could help you with that? What if we could engage your kids in what you're already teaching? What if we could help them achieve a deeper understanding and not just memorize it until Friday for the quiz, but walk away at the end of the course with a deeper understanding? Then teachers start to lean in and say, well, tell me more. And it's not a simple, snap the fingers and everything changes. It is about professional development. It is about sharing models with teachers of other teachers doing great work so they can see that it's doable and feasible in their classroom. So there are great resources online, as you can imagine. One that comes to mind is called Edutopia, a great website. Another is called the Teaching Channel. And both of those have great videos looking at secondary schools, middle and high schools, that have taken meaningful steps to integrate the arts. And often watching the video of a real classroom with a real teacher is going to be more helpful to teachers than just hearing me or anyone else kind of give a talk about it. It's making it real with kids who look like they're kids. But those tools are out there. That work is being done all around the country. That's really exciting. So it's not a brand new idea. It's just an opportunity to bring new people into this conversation.
Mark, what in a traditional school that is said, watch this, for example, this show, and said, yes, I would like to do that in my school. What's the role of the arts teachers? I'm sure if I'm a principal and I've heard you and you've convinced me, I'm going to go back to the building and go pull my art teachers, my performing arts teachers, those folks that are on those staffs together and say, help me with this. What's the role of those traditional arts teachers in this integration?
Well, it's a good question, and it's important to remember that if we look at schools that are struggling the most and working with kids who could most benefit and who are most at risk of dropping out, those schools tend to have the fewest number of art specialist teachers. So first, it starts with the assumption that there are necessarily arts teachers in those schools. There often are not enough. When they do exist, they're often a department of one. So unlike math or English, where they work together and they have planning meetings and they support each other in curriculum design and planning, the one band teacher or the one chorus teacher is often by themselves and isolated and not thought of as a collaborator and not thought of as a coach or a resource. Further, they're often rewarded only for putting on the show. In some communities, arts are like sports. It's competitive. The band or the dance company or the drill team go off and compete and try to win trophies. And art teachers are rewarded for that. I would love to change that model where arts teachers, part of their day is seen as an instructional coach. To your point, where that music teacher has time in their day to be away from the band room and be visiting a history teacher and either modeling a certain lesson that might integrate music or observing the history teacher and offering feedback. So those art teachers, where they exist, can be resources. We also want them teaching the discipline. So it's not either or, it's both and. And I would hope that art teachers would own that status as a collaborator with the rest of the faculty. They're not used to that. They're used to being alone and they're used to being under-supported. So that takes a little bit of encouragement and support, ideally from principals who say, I want to use your talents in a broader way. So it's not just the kids playing clarinet who benefit from your learning, but it's every student in our school who can benefit from your expertise.
I mean, this is very true. I'm a former history teacher, so I'm listening here thinking about my students did not learn how I learned in college. My most recent experience is taking a history course, and I soon learned that. And a project-based learning, which can include all the arts, if we have someone helping that history teacher. So I see the exciting thing, you know, Sandy's always saying, well, how do we get started? What next? And we all go back to professional development and these professional learning communities. And who could be in these small groups, as you're saying, the art or the music or performing art, you know, whoever is in that school or in the community perhaps could join that group to help break down the way, this is the way I've always done it kind of thinking. This is how you teach it. It is not exactly true. Mind you, I was teaching 7th graders after taking a college class, so I had to change my strategy really fast. As 21 years of age, I learned pretty fast what to do. So I love the idea of multiple disciplines coming together and being encouraged to use some kind of different modality. And I keep thinking of the multiple intelligences. When I listen to you and hear what you're saying, I'm remembering the days of Howard Gardner's was 7, then 8, multiple intelligences. Heaven knows it might be 9 now. I haven't kept up with that. But how different people learn. And not everybody learned by a lecture. Not everybody learned by movement. Not everybody learned by music. But by the time you experimented with all of them, everybody learned. And that's what your classroom is. People who learn differently. And they're having fun. And I think I talk about that part because we talk about engagement. And when I was a teacher, I did this thing because I also taught language arts, playing games, you know, like Jeopardy or whatever that was. And everybody was very engaged and having a good time, but they were learning things. So talk about that if you could, please.
Well, I'm a big advocate for fun and for joy, and it saddens me that that's something subject to debate almost. But as you know, in schools, we privilege a very narrow set of skills that's really about rule following, sitting still, sitting quiet, being compliant, being able to absorb a lot of information and make sense of it only by hearing it or reading the text or seeing the numbers. And we limit as less than those kids who struggle with that kind of learning. And the reality is that when you get out of school and hopefully graduate, hopefully move onto a path towards meaningful careers or opportunity to be in college, you find that employers aren't really hungry for people who can sit still all day as the leading skill that they're looking for. Or rote memorization is the key aspect of the jobs of the future. We want people who work in groups, who communicate well, who solve problems from, you know, different kinds of angles. And yet our schools do so little to prepare people in that regard. So I would love to see school become much more fun and joyful, but that means a new way of measuring success and giving teachers license to have noise in their classroom, to have kids moving about in a way that is less orderly, that, there are groups talking over each other. There's a group on the side working on a project. There's a group standing up and presenting something to others. It saddens me that in some schools, teachers are chastised for that activity level, in a high school, that they want to see kids sitting still, lined up in neat rows, looking at someone lecture in front of the classroom. So all these things need to be reimagined, and it's happening to a degree all over. But the other point I would make is that we need to connect the dots between several things that are being advanced in schools right now. So you had mentioned project-based learning, which I think can be great when done well. We talk about social-emotional learning and giving voice to the issues and challenges that kids face as adolescents, and an outlet for what they're grappling with. So if we think about project-based learning and social-emotional learning and arts education as three wholly separate things, that feels kind of overwhelming. How would we ever have enough time to do three different things, or to offer professional development in three different areas and do it well? That becomes fragmented. So I'm really interested in ways to align and coordinate and integrate so it becomes one thing, that the arts are part of the conversation. It's not a magic bullet, but we're thinking about how the arts and project-based learning overlap in a history class where we want kids to demonstrate how they were solving a historical problem, not just in writing an essay or standing up with index cards and reading their notes, but maybe creating a brief dance piece, or creating a really interesting mural or collage, or writing original composition of music and lyrics that speak to it. That can become really exciting. And I promise you that when learning does involve these different dimensions, young people will remember what they learned potentially for the rest of their lives. If we're only working in worksheets and multiple choice questions, they're unlikely to remember it through the weekend.
Mark, you mentioned careers. Let me sort of wander off in another direction for a minute. I remember when I was I think I was in the 8th grade, and I told a neighbor, I'm going to be in the band and play a trumpet. And he said, you'll never make a living playing a trumpet. Why would you do that? Is there any transfer value of the arts and what we learn in the arts and what we learn in a classroom like a history or math class where the arts are integrated? Is there any transfer value to the world of work?
Yes is the short answer, and it's a great question. And we need to be careful that it's not the word art that has all these magic powers. Mm-hmm. It's great teachers engaging kids in really effective ways. Mm-hmm. So just like any discipline, you can be an incredibly effective music teacher, or you can be a lousy music teacher. And simply using the word music doesn't convey all the benefits that we would hope. So it's looking at what are the elements of effective arts instruction or arts integration that can produce the kind of benefits that we're talking about. So for example, in the band classroom, some band programs are only about reading the music on the page, rehearsing over and over again, and performing it at a concert, a couple months later. And that's fine. But I'm not sure that experience necessarily provides all the benefits of teamwork, collaboration, creativity, problem solving, and so on. On the other hand, what if the music students are asked to work in small groups and compose original music? What if they're given an opportunity to improvise, which is the ultimate form of innovation? What if they're asked to compare and contrast music of different cultures and different periods and look for, what's the same and what's different? So some kinds of instruction, when done well, start to get at the benefits or the attributes that we would want in the workforce, mm-hmm. in a general sense. this idea of 21st century skills, which we talk about creativity and collaboration, communication, problem solving. Those can exist in arts programs when done well. Mm-hmm. The other side of the equation is in the creative economy, certainly here in California, we need animators. We need music composition, music composers for video games and film. We need graphic designers. We need recording engineers. We need lighting directors for stage and screen. We need choreographers. Those are jobs in and of themselves that are incredibly meaningful and important and are an important part of our economy. So we need to let go of the myth of the starving artist, where arts are seen as less than relevant because what are you going to do with it after all? When in fact, the arts can be profoundly valuable whether you're going to be in another field but apply skills you learned in the arts, or whether you're going to have a direct kind of arts-related career.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hearing a lot about engagement in school, and therefore academic achievement, if you're there and engaged, will rise. I'm hearing also the transition to the world of work by gaining all these skills that are important to have in the workplace. There's a piece here now that I'd love to talk about, and that's social emotional development and the impact, particularly, well, we've talked with folks about the all students mm-hmm. have these issues going on. I mean, if you ever had kids or if you ever were one, you know that to be true. So, there's always something going on with young people, and some particularly have difficult times to go through. I'd love to hear, Mark, if you have some stories of this kind of support in the development of strong social emotional development through art participation in school or in your Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, well, I shared an example at the conference in Palm Springs that Sandy mentioned earlier. I did a project with a local LA high school called Fairfax High School, which is an incredible multicultural point of entry. It's like the Ellis Island of Los Angeles, where kids literally from all over the world are entering in high school. They're brand new immigrants, not all students in the school, but many are new immigrants from Asia, from Central America, from Africa, from the Middle East. So imagine coming to a new country, coming to a new school, struggling to learn a new language, and facing all the issues that all teens face, which is, who am I? How do I fit in? Am I accepted and valued for who I am? And so we did a project with an English as second language teacher who was working with a classroom of students from all over the world, facing all these issues, fears, a lot of trauma about the process of maybe leaving family to come by themselves to the United States. So all that is bubbling under the surface while they're struggling in an academic sense to learn the language, and through the kind of basic exercises and activities you'd expect in a classroom like that. So we did a project with an amazing theater teaching artist named Madeline Dom, who worked with that English as a second language teacher and her students to create a process for them to communicate their stories ultimately on stage. Mm-hmm. They read poetry by a famous poet, Pablo Neruda. They learned through video and dance by the famous choreographer Alvin Ailey, called Revelations, which was about really the African-American experience in the United States since slavery. But as examples through Neruda, through Alvin Ailey, is how the arts can convey our heritage, our stories, our hopes, and our dreams. And the assignment was for each of them to write a brief poem or a brief statement that was encapsulating their journey and what they're grappling with. And it culminated in a presentation. They have a small theater, and other classes were brought in. The principal was there. Some of the parents came. And the students, in sort of a theatrical way, it wasn't just kids standing up on stage alone, shared those stories. It was profoundly moving and empowering for young people who have never had, in this case, a forum to tell their story and be listened to deeply for who they are. So it had a kind of therapeutic benefit for those students, certainly a sense of empowerment that they could overcome the fears of public speaking in a new language, the fear of being on stage in front of an audience. Can be transformative when you succeed in kind of crossing that threshold and being successful. And it sent an important message to the other students in the audience who suddenly saw them as fellow human beings and not just outsiders who looked funny or talked funny. And the principal said after that as 30 years as an educator, he had never seen something so powerful in making a difference around the issue of bullying, which is a challenge in that school, where there's tensions and conflict among kids who are different from one another. And so creating these kind of forums through the arts for people to share their stories, to be listened to and valued and respected, can be a huge benefit in multiple levels. But certainly to this idea of social emotional learning, which we often think of as just a buzzword that can be wrapped in jargon, we can make it real when it's about giving voice to young people who haven't felt that anyone cared about their story. And for me, that's the big idea. So much of schooling is someone else's story, someone else's facts and figures, where kids passively are just receiving. So when they have a voice to share what's on their mind, that can be hugely beneficial on multiple levels.
That's great. When you look at the issue of becoming resilient, which we talk about a lot, the National Dropout Prevention Center and elsewhere, and that there are identifiable resiliency characteristics, I think about those who are more successful in, maybe because it's more fun, in the arts, whether it's acting or performing music or singing or dancing or visual art, or go down the road. If a student does get excited about work and has a mentor, their teacher, advisor, people at your center, do you see the development of that sense of, mastery of something, the confidence you get for knowing you're good at something? I see the arts providing that opportunity for young people. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it every day, where kids are defined, as I mentioned earlier. Johnny in third grade is labeled a troublemaker because he fidgets throughout the class. He doesn't focus in well. He can be disruptive, is constantly being disciplined and sent out of the room. And now we're doing something that involves dance. And let's say a dance teacher or dance teaching artist is in the classroom engaging kids in dance. And it may turn out that the most skilled or the fastest learner in this dance project is that same student, Johnny, who suddenly thinks of himself in a different way. And the other kids, and even the teacher, looks and says, you know what, I've never seen him engage so deeply. I've never seen him care about something. I've never seen him be successful. Those moments are magical. Doesn't happen every time, again, and it has to be done thoughtfully and effectively, but it's creating new forums for kids to find success. And when we think about the other end of the spectrum, when kids are dropping out of school, someone told me the other day that it's possible that no one ever told them in their life that they are capable of excellence. And when you never hear those words, your self-image is defined by what you cannot do and how you're labeled for your deficits. So arts opportunities expand the range of forums for kids to shine, to find what they're good at, to demonstrate that success to themselves, maybe to their parents. I was involved in a project in the visual arts where a young woman was recognized for excellence from a Korean immigrant family, where the family did not want to honor her skills in the arts. And when she won an important award for excellence in the arts, it changed the way the parents viewed her and changed the way the parents thought about the arts. So I think all kids deserve the full range of opportunities in which to shine. And as we said earlier, when you just define it by their ability to sit still and memorize facts and figures, we're just shutting out the talents of too many kids.
Well, I'm thinking self-confidence is a huge issue in the ability to succeed in school in anything. And if once a child feels confident in item A, they transfer the confidence is not about the item, it's about my own sense of self-confidence.
Yes. Yeah.
And so once that's achieved through the arts or whatever source, then the child transfers that to other things. And that's such an important thing.
That's a big thing. There's some other areas of this social emotional development that you see. I think that personally to me seemed like a really big and important one in the engagement piece. But do you see some other things with the young people out there?
Yeah, I'm involved in a project that's actually culminating tonight here in Los Angeles, using the arts to engage young people when they are been incarcerated in the juvenile justice system, and then as a tool for empowerment when they return back to the community. And again, it's a way to give them tools, appropriate tools, to share their experience, their feelings, their struggles, whether it's through spoken word poetry or a song or a movement piece or a video that they've created. That ability to have an outlet, to have a productive way to share what you're feeling with, even when you're angry, even when it is profoundly tragic what you are expressing, but it's an appropriate and safe way to express yourself. The benefits are enormous. So it's not about ultimate artistic skill, and the event we're doing today is not, putting on a show that's going to win a Tony Award, but it's shining a light literally on young people who have been through hellacious experiences and letting them feel success and letting them feel that they're people who care and letting them feel that they have a tool to share their story. So I just see it on a daily basis. I'm blessed in my job to have these opportunities to work with young people, but to see the personal growth that helps them, as you said, become more resilient, become more confident, that are life-changing, and ultimately maybe even more valuable than the technical skill they might learn in the arts.
Mark, question for you. You're out there in one of the nation's largest school systems in the whole country, and you have economy of scale and that type of thing. What if I'm a viewer watching this and I say, well, that's great, but I'm out here in the far end of North Dakota with a much smaller setting, much less community resources. Could you speak to how we could apply some of these concepts in maybe a rural setting or in a different setting?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So a couple things. First off, there are great examples of almost every problem we're trying to solve in arts education. There are models that already exist that are doing great work. So there are rural communities in California, believe it or not, in our massive state, include smaller rural communities. And the basic issues are the same. The community resources might be different. There's not a museum down the street. There might not be, an internationally acclaimed symphony orchestra in the neighborhood. But the basic issues and valuing of how we want to engage kids are the same. So that's the first point. The second point is more and more I've come to think of school districts as the unit of change as opposed to one classroom at a time. If we believe these values we've been discussing are important for all kids, then we need to look at the whole school district and ensure that what we do is equitable for all students and not luck-based, depending on whether you're in the right classroom with the right teacher in the right year in the right school gives you access, but the kids across the hallway don't have it, or the next school down the road don't have it. So I think it starts with superintendents and school boards saying this is a value, arts and arts integration, that we value for all of our students. We're going to adopt a policy that makes that clear, and we're going to create a plan for moving forward to provide equitable access for all of our students. When you go down the road, it's not a different road than how do we create an effective math program K-12. How do we create an effective language arts program K through 12? It's about learning standards, it's about curriculum resources, it's about professional development, it's about meaningful assessments, it's about a process of feedback and coaching and support for teachers. This is not a whole new thing. It's a different discipline, but the process of creating or rolling out a fair, equitable program across a school district is essentially the same. So if we move the arts into the box of instruction and not as enrichment, and think of it as equity for all of our students, just like the rest of the core curriculum, then I don't think it's mysterious about the process elements to doing it. And as I mentioned earlier, there are just fantastic resources online from so many great organizations that have model lesson plans, that have curriculum units, that have professional development modules that teachers can access, whether they're in an isolated rural community or in the heart of a big urban center.
So it sounds like you're saying that this message is almost as important, or maybe more important, to be heard by decision makers and system governance personnel, maybe as much as it is the history of the math teacher.
Yes, it's both and. It's not either or. The vision and the leadership and the expectation come from the top. The classroom support needs to be there kind of bottom up. It's not just a memo from the district office saying you will teach the arts effectively tomorrow. It is a vision saying we want this for all of our kids. It is the vision of our school district that all kids shall have access to an educational program, including the arts. That policy statement starts with the board, and the resources that need to come with that and the expenditure of funds that come with it need to come from a board and superintendent. But the support needs to be there. Teachers are heroes. They already have too much on their plate. They want to do the right thing, but they need coaching and support, resources, encouragement. But I've seen it time and again that when those aha moments occur, when school boards think about the arts differently, when superintendents value it differently, when teachers start to see firsthand the benefit in their students, then great things happen. And those communities are now on the road to success. And because the value is there, they're going to make it. So I think the hardest part is the initial spark, is creating movement from an inert state where there's just been an acceptance of inequity. There's been an assumption that the arts are for the talented few. And when that light bulb goes off that this is essential for all of our kids, and people get excited about it, then great things are possible. And I see that all around the country. Districts small and large are expanding their commitment to the arts, are increasing their investment in the arts, and great things are happening for kids. So this is not a radical new idea. This is an enduring American value. And we need to just connect people to the help and the support and the inspiration they need to get going.
I think the concept, Marty, of equitable access to the arts is fascinating, because I can remember in my career earlier years seeing so many examples of not for you because, and yet the equitable access is exactly what those underserved and more challenged subgroups of students need.
That's what they need. And what I think with this whole topic is putting it to the forefront again, because oh yes, we need to get students more engaged. Oh yes, they have trauma. Oh, we have this, and improve the graduation rates. Stop a minute and see something so valuable in all those domains, and engaging students, helping them socially, emotionally, helping them prepare for careers, and just by revisioning and the excuse of we don't have resources, I think you've already shown us, oh yeah, thanks to the internet, we've got resources for teachers. I just have to tell the story. I every time I listen to someone, I say, oh, I've got so many grandsons that there's always one who fits into one of these descriptions. So anyway, but one of them, this summer, he and his little brother were staying with me to go to camp and play with Grammy and all these kind of things. And they made a movie on the iPhone with, the little subtext, the music, the this and that. They all acted together and they made it themselves. And you don't need to have a $6,000 camera and a recording studio and all that, and the computers to put it all with his fancy software. Although when you get older, it's nice to have that. But if you are in a school that, well, we can't do that, but the kids are drawn to it, and the creativity that was involved in putting together, I'd love to share it with you. This great little video these kids just did on their own. I never said anything. Next thing I know, look what we did. And the resources can be found with simple things like an iPhone, or even simpler than that, because that's pricey, but somebody presumably will have something similar. Along with all the resources. So there are the resources out there for the teachers in the schools. There is the research base to prove this is worth looking at. And there's the resources for kids should, these other expenses are daunting. But I don't know if you've ever heard of a case where it just can't be done. I don't feel like that's the case.
And I'm sitting here thinking, in the big scheme of things, in a school system budget or a whole school budget, the arts are a relatively small piece of that budget, I assume. Is that correct, Mark?
Well, yeah, it depends on compared to what. The key, again, if we think of it as instruction, now we have the whole district budget to look at.
Yes.
Schools always need more money, but as a former school board member, I know there are a lot of money in a lot of the pots that already exist. When we think of it as an elective or enrichment, we put it off in this kind of charity category, where it's not a district obligation. Maybe there should be a fundraiser or a bake sale, or somebody should donate some musical instruments. So this is core for all kids, and it's got to be equitable. So districts just don't flinch at saying, do we really need textbooks for all of our schools? Of course we do, and we have budgets to do that. So if we really want the arts for all of our students, then yes, there are resources that come with it. But for me, the bigger idea is not, again, the putting on a show, although that's fantastic. Musical instruments do cost money. Great arts teachers do cost money to pay people, the salary that they deserve. But the most important thing is unleashing the joy in school that we're talking about, is giving kids a sense that they matter, that their stories matter, that they have an outlet for those stories. Those things are not about money. It's about climate. It's about valuing. It's about our deeper belief about what school is even here for. So to me, that's the fight that motivates me, or not the fight, the cause that inspires me.
Yes.
Is how we value our kids and give them a way to be successful. That's the bigger idea. The arts can contribute to that and are part of the solution, but are not the magic bullet and do not exist by themselves.
It's just kind of like thinking it's something that your heart and your emotional gets attached to, and learning improves when that's happening. It's like old service learning world that we've been part of over so many years. The heart is needed for the brain to learn, and and the joy of it, having fun instead of being surly and just make me learn that. Totally different approach. I think if I was going back to teaching, I'd be so excited about this whole idea. And my little role playing or little different things that we did project based was, apparently I was on target, but needed somebody to give me some guidance. Nobody did. Nobody did that. So this is just terrible. I thought it was important before we started this conversation. I can see how, Sandy, that you were totally sold hook, line, and sinker and said, please join us on Solutions, because we need everybody to hear this message. It is beyond important, Mark. Really great.
Mark Mark, you just said the arts are part of the solution, and relative to other things, and now I'll say it about the arts. I've said to superintendents and school boards at times, what's another 20 graduates worth to you? What's another 10 graduates worth to you? And I have no problem at all envisioning how the type of arts integration and the focus on the arts by other non-arts instructional people, I can have no problem seeing how that can generate another 10, 20 graduates in a heartbeat.
Definitely. And I know you've seen that. You probably know so many students who had a transformational experience by participating in one art form or another, and got reconnected and saw their future and saw their value and graduated. And any more stories like that? I love hearing those stories, Sandy.
Well, a great story from the conference in Palm Springs that the center hosted. There was a breakout session with students from a local high school in the Palm Springs area that had a small learning academy within a larger high school focused on arts, media, and entertainment. And in this panel session, it was led and presented entirely by the students, which I think was fantastic. And they talked about the school and why it's so meaningful for them and so on. So one of the adults in the audience said, well, what happens when students drop out? And the kids just looked blankly like, I have no idea what you're even asking me. What do you mean? And they said, well, what if a student didn't come to school? And the kids looked at each other and said, well, we would just call them or text them. And if they didn't respond, we'd just go to their house. Why would somebody drop out? We wouldn't let that happen because they had such a sense of ownership and such a sense of community. And to me, that's the ultimate goal, is a school where kids are so valued and have so much sense of ownership that they would never let one of their peers drop out. That's the opposite of the large kind of impersonal school where kids are not known or valued and can fall through the cracks. So that sense of community, that sense of tribe is the word that some people use, where people feel like I'm understood and valued for who I am. I see that all the time in the arts in general, and then within each group, the community of dancers, the visual art kids, the photography kids, the band kids, the jazz kids, the musical theater group. Those create families in our schools that bind kids to one another and to the adults in a way that is not impossible in the other disciplines, but you don't always see that same enthusiasm in a trigonometry classroom.
Marty, I have to tell you this story, and Mark, I have to share this with you. It's a little off the topic, but I never thought of it for the last 50 years until now. I was in the 10th grade. I played second chair trumpet, and the first chair got to play solos occasionally or something similar, and I wanted to do that. So I asked Mr. Gillum, the band director. I said, Mr. Gillum, what have I got to do to play first chair trumpet? And I assumed he would say, you need to play better, you need to improve your skills. And he said, you need to get out of making a D in Miss Walker's history class. And that was his own, and we'll talk. And so those teachers were connected. They obviously had conversations in a lounge or somewhere about something, about their students. And so I never thought of that, Marty, but it made me realize how important these folks that are arts instructional personnel, in so many ways, how important they are to the other parts of school success.
We're all looking here back in our own lives. My grandchildren, one thing. This one touches me. All these years of doing workshops in service learning, one of the questions you ask, think about back to your childhood for a memorable learning experience. Nobody ever said the spelling test, that I got 100 on. Nobody ever said that. I said, when I first went to workshop, and this was asked of me, it was participating in the orchestra when our junior high school did the Mikado. And my brother played the drums, and I played the French horn, Sandy. Okay. And our school made a value of that for the 8th period, and we do that. But there were people making costumes, and people doing everybody was engaged in that school, the art teacher, everybody, and that was the most meaningful memory I have to this day of a learning experience. And then the next few years later, I was on stage. No more French horn. I wanted to have something more fancy to do, and I got to do a little dancing and singing stuff with a group, never solo. But boy, did I love that. That's the strongest memory for me, and really made me attached to my school. And we had a reunion years ago, small town, very small town, and everybody talked about those things. Those were the things that gave us an attachment and a love for our school and the community of all of us who did these productions. I mean, it's just that, back to that, I hope my mic isn't there, the heart kind of thing that you're feeling. And it had powerful difference for all of us. We learned a lot. And I go back to this thing, academically, socially, emotionally, career development, all those pathways that are so important to prevent dropouts are incorporated, when arts are integrated into the school and valued, and whether as an add-on, as a down the hall, but they're also coming into the classroom. This is just super. I have to. I'm talking in the mode of summarizing now because we are reaching the end of our hour. But if you had any final questions, Sandy, or Mark had any more final statements, I guess I'm just showing my enthusiasm here and go to you now.
Well,
Sandy.
my takeaway, Marty, is we've got to get this message out to more educators.
Yeah.
We have to change some mindsets. We have to help people understand how important the arts are, both in the arts classroom, in the other classrooms, and in the whole culture of the school, and in achieving the end goal, which is student success and school completion, able to do something next. It's valuable, and that is so important. And I just want, sitting here as a former administrator and as a current school board member, I'm thinking we've got to help people understand how important this is as part of the solution.
Yes. Do you have any?
Yeah, I think Sandy said it well. For me, the big idea, it's not that the arts have value. The big idea right now is that the value may be greatest for the kids who have the least. And that's the barrier that we've faced, is that for kids struggling in school, we know who they are. We're spending a lot of time and money worrying about them. But we've put them on a track that is so focused on remediation that we've robbed the kids who need the arts from the chance to take the arts. So whether there's an award-winning band program down the hall or not, those kids are told, you can't have access. We're going to schedule you in double block of mathematics and language arts remediation because that's what you need, that we're going to rob you of the joy and the fun and the opportunities we've been discussing today because we've so narrowly defined what you need, in quotes, in order to succeed. So I do worry that our remediation philosophy is pushing out the kids that we say we want to help. So to me, that's the new idea, not that the arts are wonderful as electives or should be there for kids who are thriving. The new idea is that they are part of the solution for kids who get the least and kids who are having the most struggle in school. Those are the kids who need a urgent injection of joy and hope and opportunity and meaning, and we owe it to them to give them those tools and those opportunities. So that's what my hope is, that people start to think differently about the connection between the arts and this idea of struggling students and those most at risk of dropping out.
Wow.
That's a great summary.
It is. I'm going to start posing the question, to what extent are your at-risk and most at-risk students accessing the arts?
That's a good question. And we look forward to answers changing after hearing this program and reading that research report, because so often we have to have evidence-based to go in front of a school board or this or anybody to say we want to move in this direction. And we say, well, the importance you've summarized so well, Mark, and that report nails it. So I think we made a statement today.
Thank you, Marty. I think we did. We've got to get this message out, and we certainly would say to our viewers that are watching this broadcast, check the resources, look at the resource section, communicate with us. Mark's contact information will be there. Ours will be there. We'll put you in touch. We want to get this conversation going and have people share ideas and talk about how we need to rethink our consideration of the arts as part of the solution.
Right, and there is that discussion board, so you can immediately go
Yes.
and start sharing your stories or asking questions, and Mark has agreed to be involved in a conversation with you should you like to do that. So this is just the beginning, and like all professional development, this is a catalyst. This program today is a catalyst for further action wherever you are in this country, in whatever type of school or community. You've been given some tools, go for it, because this one's worth it.
It is. Mark, we really appreciate your sharing with us today. You've been a great asset. You're out there on the other side of the country at a time that's different from our time. and we appreciate that. You've certainly gone above and beyond to help us and to share. And I know our viewers appreciate it, and here at the National Dropout Prevention Center, we certainly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good. Marty?
I loved
What
it.
a great show. Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Both.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Sandy.
All right.
Always ask the best questions. I defer to you always in that department as much as I can. Thank you. See you soon, I hope, Mark. And we hope we'll see you soon, too, as we go forward with the solutions to the dropout crisis. It's been a good day, and we are happy to have had you with us.